Hey, welcome to day 3 of Spirit Week. One of the stories in the Bible that I have a deep connection with is the walk to Emmaus, found in Luke 24. And I'd like to read it to you before we start our walk today. This is Luke 24, 13 through 35. Now the same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all these things took place. In addition, some of the women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it was just as the women had said, but him they did not see." As he said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these days and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he was going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in and stayed with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while we talked with us on the road and opened the scripture to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together, and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 told them what had happened on the way, and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Have you ever met a stranger and felt an instant connection to them? I imagine that's the way Cleopas and his friends felt on that road trip. The story starts telling us that they were on their way to Emmaus, a town about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking about everything that had happened, trying to wrap their brains around it. Their teacher, the one that they had hoped would save Israel, was gone. They had waited the 3 days that Jesus told them to, and now towards the end of the 3rd day, they were going back home. I think about them walking back home in a state of shock, confused, sad. Their own grief so strong it seemed like a heavy chain, slowing them down. When a stranger shows up and starts a conversation with them on the road, the stranger, who we find out later is really Jesus, asks them what they're talking about. And the question stops them in their tracks. All they can do is let the sadness they feel bubble to the top and become visible on their faces. It took a stranger's question to stop them so that they could pause for a moment in that sadness. I love how Jesus shows up and gets right to what they are feeling. As a minister, I've been with families and friends in this exact moment of sadness and grief. Jesus responds to them the way a minister would. He asks them questions and gives them a space to remember their teacher. They tell him that they had hopes of what might have been if Jesus were still alive. He may have redeemed Israel. They tell about who Jesus was to them He was their prophet, and he did many great things and shared great lessons. They tell of the injustice Jesus faced that led to his death. He was crucified because those in power didn't understand him. They tell that it had been 3 days since Jesus had been crucified. They tell about the hope that they had when the women had reported that Jesus was alive, only to have that hope crushed when the other disciples went looking and didn't find Jesus. Most of us have been on that road before, the road marked with grief and lost hope. We know that a crushing blow it can be to have our dreams crushed, how it can drain our bodies and our souls. I think about those walkers standing there on that road, feeling the blow of this loss in front of a stranger. The stranger responds by offering new hope. He explains to them that their hope in a redeemed Israel. The Messiah came to enter glory, but suffering was part of that journey for him. It's a journey that had been laid out by Moses and the prophets. At this point, the story doesn't tell us what was happening in the hearts of the walkers as they heard and were handed that hope back. Later we find out that their hearts were burning with this message of hope, but for now we don't know that their feet started moving again and they make progress towards Emmaus. Hope has a way of causing us to move forward again. The walkers, they make it to their village and they stop for the night. Jesus, the stranger, starts to walk on, but they stop him. The Greek used here suggests that they twisted his arm to stay. You see, the road was a dangerous place at night. They cared about the safety of their new walking partner. A bond birthed on a walk. That happens when you share grief and hope together. Once they see him at the table, this place where they had shared community together, countless times before, Jesus takes the bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it to them. Only then do they recognize who he is. I find real comfort in the fact that they recognize Jesus when he's at the table with them, doing something that they had done together many times before. It was a part of their normal life together. That comforts me because it reminds me that Jesus shows up in the little moments of life and community. We don't have to wait for a huge or special occasion to encounter Jesus. We just have to keep our eyes open as we live our life together. I have a couple of questions for you to reflect on today. The first one, where do you find hope? Where do you find hope? And number two, where do you see God in your everyday life? Where do you see God in your everyday life? Spend a few moments answering those questions today. Thanks for journeying with me. I'll see you tomorrow on our daily walk. Remember to keep your eyes and your hearts open today as you encounter Jesus. I'll see you tomorrow.